And good morning. You've got Representative Saine here for our show, All Things Sane. I'm your host, and today we are broadcasting from the Legislative Building. We had to come back up for a little bit of session here in Raleigh today. A few bills are going to be on the calendar. We're still in flux, working with the budget, trying to get to a resolve with our Senate counterparts. Not there yet, sad to say. I am, of course, one of the senior appropriators, senior appropriations chairman in the House. And so sadly, it's eating up a lot of my summer too. And not that anybody's at home just waiting to see, but it is a matter of discussion here in Raleigh. And we would like to get to a state budget as soon as we can. Budget work started way back in February. House produced a budget. We got that passed out in, I think it was March or right at the 1st of April. And then the Senate took up our budget. They were very enamored with the work that we had done, but had a few suggestions and a few amendments to our bill. And we've been trying to work out the differences since then. So hopefully soon we'll get to resolve on that. There are a lot of big issues, a lot of big things in the budget, a lot of the some of the governance with Medicaid expansion, which I voted against, but was something that the Senate had pushed. The House did adopt it this year. So that's probably a big one that's in the budget that people are concerned about or are looking at, wanting to know what's next. But then a lot of other things too. There's tax cuts for individuals that we're looking at. There's how we fund state government, all the different agencies. All of that is still in play. Some other issues got resolved early on. Sports betting, which was a bill that I ran. If you followed that one we had a good kumbaya on that and got that passed. The governor signed that into law, but the budget still seems to be a bit of a sticking point between both chambers. And it's just a natural order of things. This is how democracy works when we're actually attentive to budgets and we don't just give it up to the bureaucrats. So a lot of folks, on all sides want to see things happen, whether it's a local project funding or road funding, schools, teachers, state workers. All things that we'll consider. But it's great to be with you on today. Later in the show, a little after 11:15 or so, we'll have City Councilman from Charlotte, good friend of mine, Tariq Bokhari. He'll be on. He's hard to get to talk, so maybe we can pull something out of him. I mean, he's not a very good communicator. I kid. He and I joke around a lot. We also play video games together because that's what dads our age do. And just a good friend. So we'll have a good talk with him. We'll talk about municipal elections, some of the economic development projects going on in and around Charlotte, and some of the other things happening in state government. But we'll get to that here shortly. Lots of things going on, like I say, in the House. One of the big things here at the legislature that's being talked about, medical marijuana. And Senator Bill Rabon had passed the bill out of the Senate, something that's been near and dear to him. And this is medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. So I want to be clear. Something that North Carolina has not done yet, but it did pass the Senate. It's been over in the House for a while. But the House Speaker, if I quote him correctly, said it would require a number of House members who've taken a position of no to literally switch their position to want to vote for it. And I just don't see that happening. So effectively telling reporters that medical marijuana legislation is probably dead. Echoes some comments from our majority leader in the House. His job is one of many, but also to count the votes in the House Republican caucus, basically saying the same thing earlier in the week. So that's where that stands. Doesn't mean that nothing's ever dead, truly dead at the legislature. It's more like the undead. If you watch Walking Dead, again, hey, quick pop reference there. Nothing is undead, or nothing dies at the legislature. It just might be undead. So it's living and breathing, but not by much. It could come back up at another time should legislators have a different point of view or want to take it up. But for now, at least for this legislative session, it does look like that medical marijuana will not be happening this session. Interestingly enough, other news this week, great news for our state. North Carolina is once again the best state for business. That's according to a newly released ranking by CNBC. The Tar Heel State took the first spot in the rankings in 2022 and was runner-up in 2021. In the rankings, 16-year history, the state has rarely fallen outside of CNBC's top 10. The most important factor that was assessed was workforce. in which North Carolina was ranked in the top spot. So that means we're a great place to do business. We're a great place to bring your business because we've got a well-trained workforce, and something that we've been very intentional on working on here at the legislature over the last several years, working with our community colleges, working with our four-year institutions, and of course working with our K-12, making sure that we produce students that are employable. It's important. It's important for our state to function and to be the economic powerhouse that it has become over the last 10 years. So these rankings do mean something. And not only that, it's what everyone else sees. If you're in a state that's not treating your business very well, maybe not treating your workers very well, you may want to relocate. And we're doing it all the time. I saw something the other day on CNBC where, and not that I watch CNBC very often, but someone had tweeted out at me on it, where Governor Roy Cooper was touting the fact that our state's doing such a great job, and then of course criticized the Republican legislature for all of our policies. Interestingly enough, our policies are what give Governor Cooper the reason to go cut all those ribbons and welcome all those businesses to North Carolina. I always find that fact funny and something that is of interest when he's critical of the work that we're doing here at the legislature. It is a busy time still, though, at the legislature, even though we're kind of winding down for summer. Still, a lot goes on behind the scenes. People say, well, you're a part-time legislature. I don't know what part they're talking about, or what part of that time of my day is part-time. Really, legislators, whether you're an appropriations chairman like me or just a rank and file legislator, there's a lot going on because constituents are always interacting with state government. So I'll remind you that if you're listening to this show, we're glad to help you if you live in Lincoln County in the district. If you don't live in the district and you want to call our office and find out who your representative or state senator may be, if you don't know, you can call our office. But you can also go to ncleg.gov, that's ncleg.gov, and find your state legislator. And most, if not all, are usually happy to help. And if we're not the right office to call, we try to direct those calls. So we're always working. I have a staff of three people right now. I've got Clark Reamer, who's my chief of staff. Angela Mirando is my legislative assistant, and we've got our intern in. We may bring on a show before he leaves for the summer because he's learning a lot. He grew up in Canada and then also north of Chicago. Good kid and learning a lot too. So we'll bring the staff on at some point in time. Right now, they're actually busy defending the office, making sure no one walks in while we do this broadcast. This is also a first for me. This is only our second broadcast, but the first time that we've done it remotely. So we want to check it out, see if we got all the bugs worked out. So no one's calling me and saying everything's bad on air. So it sounds like or looks like we're doing it pretty well. Also want to remind you later on the show, you can call in if you've got any questions, legislative questions, things you want to talk about. The number is 844-STUDIO-4, and I took the time to translate that for people like me who might not pick up on that real quick. It's 844-788-3464, or just remember 844-STUDIO-4, and you can call into the show at any time. I'd really like to do this at the latter part of the show because we are going to have Tariq Bokhari on here in just a few minutes, and we'll get to the hard breaks as I can do my best. So if we get to a place where I'm talking and it cuts off, then that's on me because we are doing it remotely. But I do have someone in my ear telling me that we're less than a minute down from our break. So that's it is neat to do this technology, to utilize this technology to be able to communicate to you and have our show, and really appreciate the fact that you're either listening or watching. I know it's all over Facebook, LinkedIn. I got my notices right before we went live. So really glad to have you watching and listening to the show. We look forward to all the conversations. We look forward to having Tariq Bokhari on here in just a few minutes, and we'll get to some fun stuff with him as well. Again, this is All Things Saine with Representative Jason Saine. And we're back, All Things Sane, live from the legislative building, where all fun things are happening. It's so exciting. Actually, it's kind of boring here in July. A lot of the bills to debate have already happened, and now we're just waiting on the budget. But still, work goes on. We're working on a number of items, but we also want to talk about what's happening locally. And joining me, our first remote guest for the show, Tariq Bokhari. I figured I'd get somebody who's a little technically savvy to join us. Tariq Bokhari, you look at his background there, he's got the Think Big sign behind him, and all the things that glow and look techie in the background. So, Councilman Tariq Bokhari, welcome to All Things Sane.
Long time listener, Jason, first time participant here. All Things Sane, awesome title. I thought you might have gone with Insanity. There's many options, but I think you picked a good one.
We could change it. I've got some music beds we're working on that will at least integrate Insane in the Membrane, just for that purpose. And I think as the show continues, it may get a little more insane.
I love it. So what's on your mind, buddy? What do you want to talk about today?
Well, tell me what's on your mind. So municipal elections, I think filing has started. Have you filed to run for re-election?
I have not. I went ahead and made some time yesterday to reach out to some supporters and say, we're going to go down to the old Board of Elections on Monday at noon and do the old song and dance down there. And so that's in the works. My opponent filed yesterday, same one I ran against last year. She's a real nice person. I got to know her and like her. And I kind of hope she'd run at large because I think she would have been beneficial to the council. We got a bit of a dysfunctional council in Charlotte. If you haven't heard, thought she could have been a really good ad, but she was convinced by others that she needed to go at me again. And I'm sad to see her not be able to serve, but we're willing to give that a shot.
Hey, that's the name of the game. Anyone can file, and it's it's nice that you can be complimentary to her, but want to wish you good luck in that race. Republicans are few and far between elected office in Mecklenburg County, and that unfortunately for Mecklenburg puts them at a bad position when it comes to working with the state legislature, which is important. Mecklenburg being in the city of Charlotte being our largest municipality in the state. Not having you do have a voice at the legislature. I don't mean to say that, but you've got John Bradford and now Tricia Cotham, the only in the House, the only two House members from Mecklenburg that are Republican. Work well with the delegation for sure, but it's always good to have people that are in the majority party, and so you and Ed Driggs, if I'm correct, are the only two Republicans on city council. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And, it's wild to think about the fact of, what an amazing economic engine and how much growth is happening in Charlotte on one side of the coin. But on the other side, your point of while we have representation, the city of Charlotte is primarily Democrat. It's primarily Democrat representation we have with you in the General Assembly up there. And it's almost been an adversarial kind of thumbing the nose. And I can say this because I'm speaking from down here, at the ground floor of it, relationship. And when you think about what's at stake, trying to get hospitality taxes sunset extended for all the big things that are happening, trying to focus on transportation regionally. I think people realize that doesn't seem like a smart approach, but it doesn't seem like we can get out of our own way in even solving that. And electing more Republicans would be nice, but just from a pragmatic perspective, not being so confrontational and having such a friction, is a no-brainer. And I think some of the northern towns, North Mecklenburg and above, they recognize that. And we're having this internal battle where we should be more regional, but also smarter with the General Assembly.
Yeah, no, relationships matter, and you've come up to Raleigh a good bit on behalf of the city of Charlotte, and for business in and around Charlotte as well. But it does matter, and the good news is the economy is still strong in our area. Charlotte is definitely a driver, But when you talk, as you go further up 77 to Huntersville, Cornelius, up to Mooresville, I know outside of Mecklenburg County, but those areas have a lot more kin with my district in Lincoln County than necessarily the leadership in the city of Charlotte. But glad you're there doing the Lord's work, at least if nothing else, keeping them honest. And look, they're not bad people. Just it's just a different approach to government. And to that end, having those relationships matter at critical times. Because we really do want to have a working relationship that's beneficial to everybody. Because again, I always tell people that while I may not represent the city of Charlotte, Charlotte's success is very important to the people in my district. A lot of my people drive to Charlotte, work in Charlotte. We certainly spend dollars in downtown Charlotte, whether it's the Hornets or Charlotte Football Club, the Panthers. You and I get together a good bit downtown, so it's a center really for about a 16 county area, and so what happens in the city of Charlotte matters to everybody else in the area.
Yeah, it matters a great deal, and I agree with you. Most of them are not bad people.
Yeah, I mean so not throwing shade, but we can pick on somebody if you want to, but not throwing shade, but. But let's talk about what is going on in Charlotte. So one, I tell you, favorite topic of mine, and we're going to talk more about it as the show goes on, as we get closer to football season. The Panthers, but then we've got a new coach at UNC Charlotte too, Biff Poggi. I don't know if you had a chance to meet the coach, but phenomenal guy. Was an assistant coach at the University of Michigan. Hell of a person, just a great guy. I'm going to have him on the show soon, and looking forward to what building a UNC Charlotte football following will look like. And I think it complements and works well with our Panthers. So that's coming up. We're in the doldrums of without baseball, without a major league team in our state. We've got our AAA team, of course, in Charlotte as well, the Knights. And I know you're a big sports fan like me. How much do you think that plays into sports playing into the region? How important is that?
Here's how I describe it, just as fair as I possibly could. Charlotte is in my 20 years here, it's kind of classified as a city with a chip on its shoulder, and that's in every aspect. And I think it's actually been something that's suited us. When you use that chip to try to market and define Charlotte's got a lot and all this stuff, that's bad. But when you use it to actually outperform and out-hustle other major cities, well, that's a big difference maker. And we've done that in business. We're trying to do that with transportation. But sports is, I think, one of the coolest areas in that concept, because we've always kind of been like, oh, they got a team, or oh, they got another team. But I'm starting to hear more of a national scuttlebutt around Charlotte's a sports town. And, when you go to places like Philly, right, and Boston and stuff like that, all right, well, we're not those. That's clear. But when you think about the fact that, we've got the Hornets and the evolution that's happening over there, I think there's some cool things where we've got all the building blocks. We need to become contenders. So you mentioned UNC Charlotte and the new coach. If there's a chance to kind of become contenders in there, well, that all of a sudden – now that's a different ball game. The Panthers and the draft pick and the new coaching and all that stuff. Well, contender potential, the handoff of the team from Jordan to new folks and new draft picks on basketball. That's cool. Baseball is kind of like more of a social event, and we love it, and it's awesome. I don't see us going pro there, but Savannah Bananas or something like that, maybe we could enter that league. That would be cool. But then you start looking at amateur sports and what we're trying to do at Eastland. And then you start looking at the pro tennis, the Eastern and Western Open that we're competing for with Cincinnati for the west side of Charlotte. You start looking at all these things, and all of a sudden people are like, not only is it a sports town, and I think winning and being in contention is going to take that to another level. I think the other big thing is, like, all of a sudden it's a valuable TV and fan market. And that is where we're not suddenly lucky to just have a team and we have to do whatever they say, but it's more like this is a highly sought after place to be.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's all about media markets. It's not just sports. It's about the number of people. And with our state growing, And with Charlotte at the center of that growth, it just leads more opportunities. But you do want contenders. You build a much bigger fan base when your teams are in contention. Hopefully some of these trades and some of these pickups with the draft picks, the Hornets, exciting. What was that? The number 2 or 3 draft pick that they picked up. We've got what's happening with the Panthers as that grows. We know that that's going to build interest. And some of the other sporting events that come in, the one-offs, the college football games that come in.
Wells Fargo Championship, NASCAR. It's just like the list goes on and on.
Yeah, well, we didn't even mention the racetrack because it's just a little outside the city limits, but it's still Charlotte. And I grew up going to NASCAR races. They do the free Saturdays for the Boy Scouts, which is a lot of fun. And my dad was our scout leader, so he'd take a bunch of Cub Scouts to the racetrack, and we became fans. That's still instilled in me, man. Anytime there's a race, I'm at the racetrack. It's a lot of fun, but it also builds that corporate entertainment part of it too, which means what that really means is jobs and well-paying jobs for people, and we want to see that happen because it has lifted our region up in such a way over the last 2 decades, really, to really grow our brand and to grow the Charlotte region. So, and your work on City Council is very important on that, and I do thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it. And obviously the partnership with you guys in the General Assembly, that's critical to all these things. And it's not just critical for when we want to come with our hand out and we need something. It's also critical. We don't always make, surpriser, the best business decisions down here. So putting our hand out is one thing, but getting guidance back from you is another.
Yep. No, we'll work together. We're going to take a break for just a second. We'll be back. If you'll stay on with me, Tariq, we'll have you back on and keep talking.
Local and North Carolina news now on the new 105.9
All right, welcome back to All Things Sane. I am your host, Jason Saine. Glad to have you joining us today from the legislative building. Reminding you that if you want to call in, the number is 844 Studio 4. That's 844 788 3464. Love to take your calls. Anything that's on your mind, glad to talk about it. I've got with me today a special guest, and special because he's a dear friend, and we do a lot together. City Councilman Tariq Bokhari, glad to have you on, sir. Welcome back.
It is great to be here on All Things Sane on WSIC.
I just don't know what to do with my hands. That's the weird thing, since we're doing the video too. What do you do with your hands? So Tariq, we're talking during the break, and he says, well, you're up at the legislative building. What are you working on? And we've got some, very heavy bills on the calendar today at 2:00. We're taking up the Fuquay-Varina Clemens de-annexation issue. That's going to be a hot one. Also, the Holly Springs de-annexation and Leland de-annexation and moratorium. These will certainly be hotly debated today. I kid and I jest. Not all legislative business is headline makers. So, but we also have the Harmony Love Valley election changes and the Maggie Valley Development Authority. And one more thing. Town of Lake Lure property lease. So, I know you're having an exciting time at home, Tariq, but you can't stop the excitement here in Raleigh this week.
No, hold on. I was just in Lake Lure. It's become a tradition over the years to bring my family there for 4th of July. I need to know more about this property transaction and what's going on there. I have in jest joked around in Lake Lure that one day I'll run for mayor there, but I'm going to change the name of it to like president or captain or something like that. And my one campaign slogan is going to be cellular access for all. I will get it done because you can't use the phone up there.
Well, but that's a benefit when you're there on a family vacation. I did see your pictures. You guys have done some traveling, and Lake Lure is a great place to go to. And that's not Lake Norman, which is where I prefer to be most days, including today. Speaking of broadband access on lakes, I've got a cove where I get 5G access, where I make a lot of phone calls. I actually do work while fishing, and I make a lot of calls. I know you and I have had some calls there. So maybe that's not a bad idea if you get some 5G on Lake Lure.
I'm 5G that whole place up. I think it'll be a controversial kind of campaign platform, but I'm prepared.
Well, 5G once upon a time was like a hot topic. You and I started working on that back in 2017, if I remember correctly, and I do. House Bill 317 was a big lift at the time, but you and I were working on that because we knew that one of the first places that investment in 5G technology was going to go would be the city of Charlotte. And sure enough, we got the bill passed, and I think you and I were together in a couple of press releases welcoming some of the companies that were putting in 5G. And now it's amazing just how connected the city of Charlotte is and the surrounding area. When I'm on Lake Norman, I can get 5G access. It's pretty impressive.
It's not just impressive in what people are experiencing today. When you and I went on that journey in the beginning, many years ago, we knew that it isn't just a utility, it's an economic development tool. It would be the things where if you had the first ubiquitous 5G covered city in the United States, in the world, it isn't like, oh, I'd like to come there. Any company that has a 5G R&D shop for the last decade, autonomous vehicle companies like Cruise Autonomous Vehicles, others like that, they would have to come there because their competitors would be getting a leg up on them. So now, that stuff's out there, we're going to see a revolution. And I have been a big proponent, as you have as well, in what more can we do? It's a huge rural digital divide tool. But I really believe the number one thing that we got to keep marching to from where we started is we got to make the 74 corridor the first 5G and autonomous trucking corridor from the state's largest port to and through the state's largest economy. And once we do that, not only are we going to bring business, are we going to start beating Norfolk and Savannah and other ports, we're then going to create this kind of center hub that Lumberton and all these other places can start to pull 5G from, solving the digital divide. And not only is that going to be awesome, this is how the future of gaming and esports is going to evolve to cloud-based opportunities that'll lead to STEM education, that'll lead to so many other things.
Well, speaking of that, I'm glad you brought that up. When we talk about esports and gaming, I kind of my lead in earlier. I talked about you and I get on and play Call of Duty late at night when the kids have gone to bed and will give us back our game controllers. But you've done a lot with integrating esports and with high school students, and getting that to a point where you've actually developed a pipeline of talent to go to work in programming and things that are needed, particularly in the financial sector in Charlotte. Talk a little bit about YTAC and what that is, and the championships that you sponsored. I've gone over a couple times and watched the kids play, and I think maybe a team from Lincoln County did pretty well in one of the first championships. So,
indeed,
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're being a bit humble by saying I've done that. Clearly there's a team, but also clearly you're a big part of that as well on this journey we've been in with all the moves you've been making. So it started 5 or 6 years ago as a spinoff of our adult workforce training program. It was designed for STEM developers, workforce folks that needed upward mobility to get into the workforce without a college degree. And then it spun off into high school and youth. And ultimately, it was what you referred to as YTAC, the Youth Technology Apprenticeship cohorts, that evolved into today what we know as the CMS and Lincoln County Varsity Esports and STEM Leagues, which is now transitioned to this whole statewide rollout view called VESSEL, the Varsity Esports and STEM League. So that's the kind of progression of a little idea to overall school system to multiple to now statewide. And the punchline is, if you meet the kids where they are, which where they are right now is esports and virtual worlds. Kids right now today between 13 and 17 spend 40% of all of their time, the majority, not on social media or on different apps, but in gaming virtual environments. They would rather hang out with their friends in those gaming environments in many cases than somewhere else. And they do that. My kids do that. I know your son does that. So it's meeting them where they are with competitive esports and gaming, not just playing, but playing as a team with the coach, all the traditional values that varsity sports allow, but then creating a bridge to say, well, part of the competition is also creating your own game using Epic Games, our hometown Cary, North Carolina, worldwide behemoth who created the Unreal Engine, where they can create their own games. And then we're like, oh, well, you want to compete more? Well, you need to learn how to code a bit. And you learn teamwork, you get job skills. And then ultimately STEM and esports hand in hand now are creating an opportunity, not just to revolutionize how we teach STEM in our school system in North Carolina, but directly connect that to the workforce, to your earlier point, where companies now say, well, I can't hire them today, but I'd be willing to invest in this state, in this community, if I knew there was a new pipeline every year coming year over year of STEM tech talent. And that's what it's been all about. And while we've done some groundwork and things, your connections to folks like UNC Greensboro, to the school systems in Lincoln County, who did win the big inaugural state championship at Bank of America Stadium and then over at UNC Greensboro in the last season, those connections, your work, working with the universities and having things to seed these opportunities in the budget. I mean, to be honest, your humbleness is appreciated, but I'm not going to let you get away with it saying that somebody else did this.
Hey, look, you accomplish a lot as long as you don't care who gets the credit. But I thank you. It has really been, a journey, like you say, that we've been on together. I always, there's a lot I don't know, but I know a lot of people who do know. And just picking up the phone and connecting people that I think can make a difference together has been huge. So getting you plugged in with the chancellor at UNC Greensboro, which had the vision of what they wanted to do there on esports. UNC Charlotte's working on things with esports. And of course, like you say, the K-12 and just getting everybody in the right people in the right room. We're going to take a break here on WSIC. Our call-in section is next. So 844-STUDIO-4, call us. Glad to take your calls. Welcome back to All Things Sane. I'm your host, Jason Saine, here on WSIC and everywhere else. We're on the internets. You might have heard of it. It's a thing. We're broadcasting, I think, on Facebook and LinkedIn and of course, YouTube. So lots of different places that you can find us. Glad you've joined us. Appreciate you listening in and watching. I've always said I do have the face made for radio, but here we are doing video anyway. With me today, we have Charlotte City Councilman Tariq Bokhari, good friend. We've been talking to esports before the break there. I do want to kind of close that out and talk a little bit more about it. The fact that we're able to help develop that workforce. One of the big things at the top of the show I was talking about was we got our business rankings again from CNBC. North Carolina is the best state for business according to their rankings. But the main thing that was the most important factor was workforce. And Tariq, you've done a lot in helping to build that workforce, and the people you've partnered with. It is greatly appreciated because businesses can come, but if you don't have people to work in those businesses who are well trained, who, by the way, if they have good training, they end up with better pay, and that's something we want for everybody. But I compliment you on the work you've done, and it's been great to partner with you on that. What do you think the future looks like, though, as we're in that space? You touched on it. What really does it mean as we keep getting these number one rankings, and you entertain people on behalf of the city all the time that are looking to come to the Charlotte region? I know you work with the Charlotte Regional Partnership and our many economic development arms of government and non-government. But what do you think that looks like as we continue with these rankings? What do you see on the future? What's the horizon look like?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I mean, we all know the ranking today was only made possible by Governor Cooper. So we have to take a quick second to recognize that.
All that work he's done. Yeah.
I kid. No, listen, it's a great question and one I think a lot about. For the last 6 years, aside from being on council, I've taken time off from my real work and giving back. I launched the Carolina FinTech Hub, a nonprofit that, among other things, focuses on recruiting jobs, tech companies to Charlotte. And, we've recruited over 2,000 jobs from the Carolina FinTech Hub, originated them to Charlotte in that time. And the one thing I've learned from that is everybody says they value different things, incentives, quality of life, this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, it's a question of talent. Talent is ultimately the only reason why you would decide to pick one city over another, because it's the competitive advantage that ultimately they look at to dominate in whatever industry they're in. And we have just been blessed with that ability to have that raw, ingredient set there. Now, all of a sudden, as things become saturated, more folks come in, it becomes harder and harder. So when you ask about what the future looks like, in my opinion, there are good and bad things about the CHIPS Act, how it started great, maybe some things infused in it that I didn't love that much. But one thing it really nails is the fact that the current national defense focus number one, when you think about China and other places like that, is having the talent and having the technology as it relates to microchips and transistors and fabs and the things you need there. So having all that is a no-brainer. But in my opinion, not only continuing doing these things, but on the transistor and chip side, that's where the puck is today. Where the puck is going to be is artificial intelligence, AI. I am 100% at this point certain of that. And right now, our competitor is China, who has more money than they know what to do with, is investing in 100-year outlooks. And as an authoritarian government, they have all the people doing whatever they want, which is use cases for AI, and all the money they want to dump into it with no checks. That is incredibly dangerous as it relates to our competitiveness in the world. So our nation needs to step into AI, to use cases, to funding, to the private sector leading in that space. But North Carolina in general, and Charlotte and other areas in specific, we need to really lean in hard towards those things. That's why we're applying to be a tech hub designation underneath that CHIPS Act stuff, and going hard after the AI angle with health tech and fintech and some of our other major pillars.
Well, and you're absolutely correct, and of course, any way that I can be helpful or the legislature can be helpful, we want to be. I was in Dallas, gosh, sometime over the last year. Everything kind of blurs together, but it was in Dallas for a small conference, North Carolina or National Council of State Legislators, and I'm on their cybersecurity team and on the task force there, and we were meeting and but we toured a lot of what's happening in Dallas. I mean, they've got basically certain tax districts set aside for tech and for innovation and for investment. And it was really learned a lot because that's how you learn. You figure out what other states are doing, and then we can bring it back and refine it and do it better than they're doing it. Hopefully, and a lot of that has to do with the way we've set ourselves up and as far as tax reform and some of the things that we've worked on over the last 10 years. But looking at Charlotte and the region, and really all counties around, whether it's the manufacturing side of it, when we talk about the tech that's involved, but then also you hit on something that is obviously top of mind, AI, artificial intelligence. It can be scary. We think about Terminator and Arnold and the killer robots. That part's scary, but machine learning can be helpful too, to figuring out problems. Just whether it be traffic patterns, whatever it is. But running away from it is probably the worst thing in the world we could do, particularly when people who want to defeat us, and that's the Chinese, economically, maybe militarily, hopefully not, but they are certainly they've got that long range plan. Your point about their government, we don't think this way, right? We think in 2-year and 4-year cycles because that's when elections happen. We don't think about 100 years down the road. And I'm not saying that we should become authoritarian. I'm not saying that at all. But we absolutely have to take our focus and look at, as we develop, what kind of workers we need. Where is the tech going? What does that look like? And we can't fall short on that. That's why public education to me is so important, but making sure we get it right. We just don't have, it's not about warehousing children. It's about making sure that kids are learning and that they are getting what they need, and quit using the excuse, the pandemic, and think, look, it happened, move on. But moving on means we've got to be, brighter, smarter, more educated, and really more innovative than the countries that we're up against. And so you do that too by your point, being attractive to those type of businesses coming in. So one, you got to have good schools. Two, you got to have a great workforce. And then three, you've got to have tax policies and policies that and quality of life. That people want to come and be a part of it, because happy people, who are well paid, live much better lives. We know that, and that's top to bottom. So we don't want to leave anybody behind in that. But if we don't embrace it, we could very easily. Somebody else was number one once, right? So we're number one now. How do we stay at number one and keep those folks? As we're always looking, over our shoulders at the back. I got some good friends in Utah who are legislators, and they always do very well in some of these rankings and tax policy and so forth. And I always tell them, we're coming for you, because we can't wait. We need to keep moving forward so that we do have a brighter future. So I think your comments are well placed, and that still boils down to who's leading. Are we tied up in crazy nonsense, talk that we see and that's permeating today? I mean, we're talking about men and women's sports and things of that nature. Not that we don't need to address it, because the other side is talking about it, but there's so many distractions and so many things that we're not focusing on to be competitive, and quite frankly, we get comfortable as a society. So I think that having the right leaders in place pushing for those things really do matter, and I appreciate you being cognizant of that.
And I honestly, if I was to boil down the difference between the liberal and conservative mindset in our country on this, and I'm not trying to say liberals are authoritarian, but they take more of that authoritarian path that you see China taking, which is government's going to decide, we're going to put this amount of money towards this thing, and we're going to do that. We're going to either hand it to you or give an incentive here or another. We're the more conservative mindset. And I'm not saying we do this perfectly, but if you're following the conservative mindset, it's to create a platform that incentivizes the things driven by the private sector, not by the government. And while, that's nuanced, and I'm sure there's 100 different ways someone might debate me there, I think the bottom line is the stakes are so high that we can't get distracted. Like we're distracted by these culture wars because the war is being brought there. Now, there are some people on our side that are also going to battle. And I'm not trying to say that's not the case, but we have got to figure out how to come together and focus on the true long-term enemy here, which is not being a global dominant force and democracy, in this case, leading and running AI and how it's structured, rather of the authoritarian side. That is the Terminator issue there.
Yeah, well, and it's not lost on me. When we talk about the Terminator, my wife says she still has bad dreams about Arnold Schwarzenegger showing up in the closet or something as a killer robot. But quite frankly, we really do have to address the real threats, not Hollywood, but what's really happening over the horizon. So, and that's what the show is all about. When I did my first monologue last week, I talked about the things we'd discuss, and it's great to talk about these things, get people thinking about them. If you listen to this show and you don't at least consider some of the things that we're talking about, then I'm not doing my job. Tariq, as a leader in our region, really appreciate you being on. We're going to have you on a lot more. It's just basically taking our phone calls that we normally have and putting them on air. So we get into some heavy stuff, but really appreciate you being on today. A lot of fun. You are listening to All Things Saine. We'll be back next Wednesday. I don't know where